Welcome to another episode of Judge for Yourself. The murder trial of Paralympic athlete Oscar Pistorius has dominated the country's media for weeks. Records were broken when over 100,000 articles and social media mentions worldwide were published when Pistorius took the stand in his own defense. Judge President Dunstan Malambo made legal history when he ruled that parts of the trial could be broadcast live on television. In his reasoning, he suggested that this would educate the public on the functioning of the criminal justice system and demonstrate that all are treated equally before the law. I'm not quite sure whether the Judge President could possibly have foreseen the media frenzy, not just in South Africa, but all over the world in relation to this particular case. It has raised perhaps two fundamental questions, perhaps more. Certainly the question about whether, in fact, criminal trials like this should be televised, and secondly, the quality of the media in educating the public into the criminal justice system. Now, if you want to join this debate on Twitter, please use the hashtag JFYPistorius. To discuss this topic, or these topics, we are joined by Professor Anton Harber, Director of Journalism Program at Wits, Dario Milo, Media and Information Lawyer, and Angelo Fick, eNCA Commentator. But before I begin, let's just have a look at what Judge Malambo had to say in his judgment.
Potential for the editing of court proceedings to convey an inaccurate reflection of what actually happened. This is particularly dangerous given that visual and audio recordings can be edited in a manner that does not disclose the fact of editing. This distorting effect needs to be guarded against. It arises not so much from the presence of cameras and microphones interfering with the court proceedings themselves, but more dangerously, it may arise from the manner in which coverage can be manipulated, often unwittingly, to produce communications which may undermine rather than support public education on the workings of the court.
So, welcome back. I want to ask, let me start with you, Dario. I mean, that was obviously the aspiration that the Judge President had when he allowed this to occur. And I mean, you know more about this than me, but it is a fairly unprecedented in South Africa. I can't recall a trial that has been
quite right.
televised.
The first trial.
Aspects of things have been televised.
That's right. It's the first criminal trial that's been televised live, for sure.
Now, in the light of what's going on, and obviously the program this evening is not about, you know, the innocence or the guilt of Pistorius at all. I'm not talking about that. But we've gone a long way into this trial. What's your assessment about the success of a criminal trial being televised in this way?
I think it's been a major success. I mean, I think it takes the open justice principle and it brings it into the 21st century. I mean, I think the Judge President's ruling was a very good balancing act because Oscar Pistorius and his counsel had objected to any form of audio or television broadcast. And so what Judge President Malambo did is he said, well, fine, for your witnesses, there won't be television.
How do you respond to that?
My sense is that we're in a sort of bread and circuses environment where this is played mostly for entertainment. And if I listen to, and I don't often listen, but when I do, listen to the experts talking and analysing the case endlessly in the public media, my sense is that there's a lack of depth of understanding, which then gets passed on by the way in which the superficial means by which we talk about this.
I want to come to that. I don't want to interrupt you, but I mean, I do want to come to the second question, which is the quality of what's going on in relation to reportage. But the idea that trials like this should be open to the public by way of television coverage, what's your attitude to that? Principially, was the Judge President correct to make that call, in your view? That's what I'm saying. Should we continue with this going on in the future?
My principle is no, not, because it's spilling this out for entertainment. The way in which the medium works, the way in which it sells itself and its product is for, you know, mostly for entertainment and amusement. And my sense is that the gravitas and substance of a legal system may be compromised by this kind of cheapening.
Compromise, Professor Harber?
I don't think so. I think that there are negatives and there are risks, but I think the value of having people so engaged in the intricacies of a complicated trial, and I think the Judge President was right that people are learning a great deal about a trial of this sort.
Can I ask you this? In the fraught racial context of South Africa, the idea that this is a trial of a very high-profile white person, we can't run away from that, with fancy advocates and attorneys, as it were, defending him. not the run-of-the-mill case at all, not the sort of case that the vast majority of people, having to be black in the main, actually go through on a day-by-day basis. Yet they never get that coverage. Public don't get educated into that. And
yes,
so I'm really kind of troubled, as it were, you know, if we do this, what are we going to do? Is the media going to accept that we may have to film many trials? Or
Well, I tell
is it
you
just
what-
when the public have a prurient interest?
I tell you where I have been disappointed. I think it's good for the public to see it and to watch and see the case unfold, learn about the system. Where I've been disappointed is I expect at least elements of the media to pick up on the issues raised by the case, the big and substantial social issues.
Okay.
And some have done a bit of that, but I don't think there's been enough of that. A central one is inequality before the law. The Judge President said he would demonstrate through the case that everyone was equal before the law, but this is not a typical case. And certainly I know that our Justice Project at Wits has been trying to highlight similar cases involving disabled prisoners or awaiting trial prisoners that get completely different treatment.
See, I would like to see, I mean, I'm interposing myself into this, but let me do this just for the purpose of the debate. I would like to see the public exposed to a run-of-the-mill case where people have really lousy representation, have a really fraught context in which the adjudication takes place. That's much more the reality of South Africa than this.
I wish there could have been a ruling that said you can do Pistorius,
but
you also have to do 5 other cases.
Wouldn't that have been a good idea if he'd made a condition saying, do Pistorius, but I want you to do 5 other cases in my jurisdiction?
Well, it certainly would have been far more reflective of the reality. And I agree with Anton. I think that there is a need for all our courts to be shown on television, from the small claims court up to the Constitutional Court. Even the Constitutional Court doesn't allow its proceedings to be filmed. So there is a problem with that. And the difficulty, though, for the media, I'm not going to speak for them, but is that you go for where the ratings are. You know that you're going to make you're going to have lots of viewers, you're going to have lots of listeners, you're going to have lots of readers if you do saturated coverage of Pistorius and Devani and the Kretcher case and those kind of, Johan Henning case, those kind of high-profile cases. So that, you know, it's kind of, is it a question that is the problem with the South African public, that we should be more interested in the other cases and how justice really gets
you've
dispensed
raised
in
a
South
really
Africa.
important point. I must take a break and then we'll get back.
News that moves. eNCA.com.